IPS Annual Flagship Report Sri Lanka, State of the Economy, provides a critical assessment of the country's economic performance, near-term outlook for growth and macroeconomic stability, while examining medium-term policy priorities to achieve sustained growth and development. Against the background of a progressive improvement in the macroeconomic environment led by better fiscal policy outcomes, Sri Lanka needs to urgently address structural constraints through a process of reforms if the country is to raise its medium-term growth prospects. Primary constraints on growth is an inadequate human resource pool of professional and technical skills. Given its critical importance for the economy, this year's Sri Lanka State of the Economy report focuses on the issues of demographics, labour markets and growth as its main thematic area. Sri Lanka's labour market's efficiency has to be improved by tackling two of the biggest limitations: its stringent employment protection laws and low female labour force participation rates. For example, our research finds that an employee who has worked for 20 years in a firm would get a compensation equivalent to 39 months of salaries, or more than 3 years of his or her income. In contrast, the compensation payments received by workers in other countries are much less. Similarly, we find that low labour force participation is more an issue of low-skilled females, whereas women are on par with men at higher levels of education, such as degree holders. So, greater mobility of workers through severance systems reforms and policy initiatives to give more flexibility in the workplace, job creation and improved working conditions to get more women into the workforce are important areas for change. Another main constraint dampening labour market's efficiency is the availability of skilled workers and the large number of Sri Lankan workers annually leaving the labour markets in search of employment overseas. The primary reason behind the skill shortage is the weak public education system, although ICT and English language are the most demanded soft skills in the country. Data reveals that of the population aged 15 and above, both English and computer literacy were below 25%. Meanwhile, less than 10% of the schools have facilities to teach A-level in the science stream. Outdated curricula offered by Sri Lankan universities and the lack of interaction with the private sector further widen skill gaps. In our special issues section, we look at other priority areas for policy reform. One key sector that holds the potential for strong growth but is currently underperforming is Sri Lanka's tourism industry. In 2016, tourist arrivals crossed the 2 million mark and the income from tourism rose from $320 million in 2009 to $3.5 billion in 2016. Today, the industry is the third largest source of foreign revenue to the country. But the industry faces several challenges. Inadequate research and the absence of coordination and communication among stakeholders are two of the most critical issues. Investment opportunities in tourism are also hampered by the availability of key resources, such as land. While arable land use is said to occupy 65% of Sri Lanka's land area, with much of it converted for residential or commercial purposes, the actual arable area appears to be much less, as land becomes scarcer with Sri Lanka's forest cover already below 30%. A rational land policy aligned with Sri Lanka's development priorities is critical. Efficient land management is also vital in view of Sri Lanka's rising vulnerability to natural disasters such as floods, droughts and landslides brought on by climate change and human activities. IPS research shows that over 3/4 of the farmers in Anuradhapura district have been affected by at least one disaster during the last 5 years. It is essential that climate adaptation policies and measures are built on the existing disaster risk reduction frameworks to be efficient and effective. It is also important to develop a comprehensive mechanism for sharing data and information on disasters among all users. Since the agricultural sector is deeply affected by natural disasters, this in turn puts Sri Lanka's food security at a precarious position. There is an ongoing challenge of providing enough food due to the constantly rising national requirement driven by population and real per capita income growth. The Global Hunger Index ranks Sri Lanka at 84th position among 118 countries, while the Global Food Security Index puts Sri Lanka at 65th position among 113 countries. The yield levels of domestically grown food crops, including rice, have stagnated during recent times. This threatens food availability and access in future. Therefore, in pursuing food security policies, public investment allocations should be redirected towards profitable interventions, including agricultural infrastructure development and research. Linked to food security is eradicating hunger and poverty, the heart of the 2030 SDG agenda. The Sri Lankan government has even declared 2017 as the year of poverty alleviation. However, when considering the overall SDG agenda, it is clear that significant implementation challenges are present, particularly in the areas of coordination and monitoring, awareness and capacity, data and financing. One of the keys to achieving sustainable economic development is having a healthy labor force. But non-communicable diseases, or NCDs, are increasingly threatening this. In Sri Lanka, out of the 8.4 million employed people, 17% are estimated to be suffering from chronic diseases. All of the above issues, discussed in some detail in the State of the Economy report, require coordinated policy formulation and implementation. With the unveiling of the government's medium-term economic reform agenda under the Vision 2025 program, Sri Lanka must take advantage of a more stable macroeconomic environment to lay the basis for stronger growth by delivering swiftly on economic reforms.